everybody, how are you doing? Okay, it's Valencia Marathon time. We've got a load of YouTubers running this time. We've got Jake Barraclough ran to Japan. Very exciting to see how he goes. We've got Nick Bester going for yet another sub 220. See if he can do a PB. We've got Chloe Hamard going for a W marathon, maybe a sub 3. We've got Cole Gibbens looking to consolidate his 216 in London and get back to a bit of form. We've also got a lot of other YouTubers running like Ben Parks. We've got some ones elites like Alex Yee, Phil Sesemann, Ben Connor. Okay, so here are the four main YouTubers that I'm concentrating on this video. I'll mention in passing a few others at the end, but we've got Jake Barraclough here, ran to Japan, Nick Bester, Best Athletics, Chloe Hamard, who's doing a W marathon, and Cole Gibbens, who's came to fame probably as the 216 he ran in London in 2025. So interesting one here. Jake Barraclough is the most amount of miles I think anyone's ever run since perhaps the likes of Dave Bedford, who reportedly run about 200 miles a week. It's actually an astonishing number of miles there. And you can see that he's almost running double the amount of time on feet to someone like Nick Bester, who averages nearly 100 miles a week. So, as usual, what I've done is I've analysed the 14 weeks of training prior to the marathon, but excluding the taper week. So, effectively, these stats are the 13 weeks. So, we'll take each one in turn. And you can see there at the end, I've put on what I thought is the athletes' individual targets based on the YouTube videos and my take on it. If you add on a few more columns from time before, I think I was a bit optimistic perhaps in some of my predictions in the past there. We got Andy and Robin, two of my best friends on YouTube. They did a few minutes slower than I predicted. Andy did 2:39, still a PB though, to be fair, against 2:36, and Robin on a quite a tough day in Frankfurt, he did 2:39 as against 2:34. Still very fine efforts. Dawn Sandy DNF'd in Abingdon, and Ben Felton was the only one really who I got absolutely more spot on. I was just 6 seconds out and he did a PB, so that was a fantastic run. I just put them on as well there to contrast some of the things here. So Jake Barraclough's average training pace is 7:09, which is actually faster than Andy Rayner, who's doing 7:01. And yet Jake is targeting a 2:12, and Andy is best part of a minute per mile slower. So that's quite interesting. But if you look at the mileages here, well, Andy averaged 68 for his Abingdon block, and Jake's averaging, well, over double that. So yeah, I suppose when you run that many miles, you can't run them all too quickly, can you? Having said that, if you look at Nick Bester's here, training pace 6:54 for Valencia this time. When he did his PB, put that on there, he did 6:32. So he had sort of slowed down a bit. We'll come into more detail on that one next time. And then Chloe's training pace, only an 8-minute mile. So yeah, that's quite sort of generous. Cole Gibbons' training pace this time quite similar to Jake's, isn't it? But somewhat slower than he did in the two previous campaigns. So I think it's part reflection that he was struggling from injury, and part reflection that maybe he's not quite in the shape anymore that this time, but we'll see. And Robin there, 7:22, and Dawn, 9:23. I haven't really got a comparison for Chloe or Dawn in this analysis. So here's the detail for Jake Barraclough ran to Japan. This is perhaps the most interesting one that I've done. I mean, the sheer amount of miles here is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, his lowest week there was a 93-mile week, and that was the week he had a calf spasm on a run and sort of aborted the run, had a few days sort of mulling his thoughts, still ran every day though, and then proceeded to run a 29:45 10k. Admittedly, it wasn't actually a half marathon race at the end of it. So amazing resiliency. And he's had a few problems. He got some sort of infection, didn't he, and was really in hospital for a while, and he seems to be able to bounce back with these things with amazing regularity. But look here at these mileages. For some reason he ran 174 miles, give or take the odd 0.1, in 6 weeks in that block there. So absolutely amazing amount of mileage, and that was taking him over 20 hours to do that. And yeah, you just feel tired just looking at this, don't you? Even the week before last, obviously I haven't done this week because it's the taper week, so it's not actually fully finished yet, but he did 131 miles that week, which is more miles than anybody would normally do in any week, and that was supposed to be on the taper. He's actually sort of gone back to his parents' home. I saw a video that he was in London, and so he's had a good sort of like adaptation to the European time. He's obviously come back to Europe, then gone to Spain, and Spain is only an hour difference, so shouldn't be too much of a factor here. But what he does like to do is an awful lot of marathon type races, races or half marathon races, you can see here, like you've got a 66 half marathon race, you've got a 2:17 marathon race where he basically not running flat out. He's doing 30k steady, 12k pickup at 5:05 pace. Another marathon race here where he actually incorporated 6x3k. I suppose it's not a bad idea actually, because I mean, in a marathon race you've got obviously closed roads and you've got a bit of competition, and I think Japan's so sort of busy, isn't it? He said on one of his videos you can hardly find anywhere to move, and he probably gets bored of running around that park. So yeah, not a bad idea. Maybe you can pick up a bit of extra footage for his videos as well. But yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And I think, will he have run himself out? Who's to know? I mean, he said that he was going all out for a sub 2:10. He's already downplayed that a bit to a sub 2:12. So I think it's going to be a tough ask to do a 2:12, because I mean, even in these half marathon races where I think he was really trying as hard as he could in the half marathons. But yeah, you'd have to run that pace again. Having said that, Valencia is obviously a very fast course, and the conditions should be reasonably favourable to him. It's going to be about 15 degrees. He should be used to that warm weather from time in Japan. But yeah, it's just the sheer amount of miles he's doing here. What else have we got here? So we've got an 8k tempo in 23:57. So it's interesting that he calls effectively a 5 mile, averaging about 4:50 a tempo. So just goes to show how good these athletes are. And yeah, I mean, sometimes I find it quite mind-boggling the amount of miles that he actually does. And will that pay off? Who's to know? Who should we see on the day? I think one thing for sure is he'll give it his all. And he's probably not the most talented runner, as he admits. He says he's a bit of a cart horse. I think what he means by that, he's not got the fastest 5k, 10k times. Having said that, he did do a Japanese parkrun record in inverted commas. Don't really have such a thing as records in parkrun, do we? 14:43, which just goes to show, because 14:43 is about the times that Nick Bester are doing, and Cole Gibbens I think is running a bit faster. So yeah, I mean, you argue that's a parkrun solo on his own. He probably could run sort of 14:20, I suppose, probably in an actual 5k. But you would expect something like a 2:12 runner or a prospective 2:12 runner to be running at least under 40 minutes for 5k, wouldn't you? And at least under 29 minutes for 10k. So yeah, one thing's for sure, that he's very attuned to the marathon though, isn't he? So fascinating to see how he goes. Doesn't seem to run in overly hilly areas. I'd converted the elevation on Strava to feet per mile just to give you an indication, and that's a fairly sort of average conditions, I would say. Not particularly hilly, not particularly flat. So what do you think? How you think it's going to go? I think this is the most interesting one, isn't it? I don't think he'll be quite up with elites like Alex Yee, Phil Sesemann, Ben Connor, but he won't be too far behind, and he has a very good race, and they have a bad race. They could end up running together. Okay, so let's look at Nick Bester. He's one of the ones I traditionally do, and remember his PB from Berlin last year was 2:19:45. That's the only sub 220 he's done. But he's done an awful lot of 220s, 221s, 222s. So I think it's going to be very close again. It's interesting this time. He's actually been coached by Neil Danby from Holland Sports, who coaches the like of Jack Kavanagh, who's one of the leading 5k runners around at the moment. He recently set a Battersea Park record, I think, of 13:34 in the recent elite 5k race there. So yeah, a good pedigree of races. But I think it's interesting this time that although he's been a coach, I think it's very much that Nick is actually driving his own content here, because he's done an awful lot of races. I mean, admittedly some very fine ones, 2 10k PBs. The footage there was Elish McColgan. I think it's a technical win over her, although I think Elish was actually faster over the line. I think there's a bit of a chip time differential. But anyway, pretty much on a par with Elish McColgan, who's one of the best female runners in the world, isn't it? So yeah, that's not too bad to be up with the likes of her. But then ran slightly faster still at Brighton 10k in 30:22. I think he had a pretty decent 10-mile race at the Great South Run, 51:25. But this time doesn't really have anything longer than that. I mean, he went over to Ethiopia, obviously at that altitude, and he actually fell over, if you saw his video. So a rather modest 36:25, but I think that was definitely an opportunity to see a different part of the world and meet a few people. I think he had a meeting with Haile Gebrselassie and stuff like that. So yeah, it'd be hard to turn down that, wouldn't it? But you wouldn't think that's the best preparation. So that's why I've been slightly pessimistic about Nick's chances this time. I think he's done an awful lot of miles, but the training does, to me, looks very focused on the shorter distances by the fact he's racing so often. And he did actually his debut, or one of the first cross-country races he ever did, which is Surrey League Division 1, which is probably one of the strongest divisions in the country, and was only 39th. But as he said, he's a bit of a fish out of water in that. And you're up against the likes of some very fast, sort of young, sort of sub 14k runners. I can't remember if Jack Kavanagh was running, but yeah, he was, probably a minute faster of a 5k at the moment. So, but having said that, look at his mileage here. I mean, he had a couple of weeks where he got over 100 miles. He did say in recent videos that he's had a few problems with sort of illness, and then I think that he was a bit of a down week slightly because he didn't feel so well. When he went to Ethiopia, wasn't feeling so well either. So yeah, I think he's put the work in. He did his traditional 3 by 10k with 1k float. He did 8, 6 and 2 seconds slower than marathon pace, or that is the marathon pace he wants to run. So that's still bad that he ran a fine time there. He says nicely in control. I think that's interesting because although he's been coached, you kind of look at this and think, well, it's still not that specific to the marathon. I think the only thing I did observe is that his average training pace is a bit slower than it used to be. They're 6:54, and if we go back to the summaries here, yeah, for Berlin it was 6:32, but I think we can partially explain that by the fact that Nick now lives in Winchester, which is a lot hilly area than obviously in London. Battersea Park is about as flat as you're going to get. So if you do a steady run in Battersea Park, you're going to get a very low elevation. If you're in Winchester, if you head out into the country lanes, you're going to get quite a lot of undulating conditions. So yeah, that's going to be quite different for sure. Is he really focused on the marathon or not? I think this time I'm not overly convinced. He's done a lot of mileage for sure, but it's been a bit variable, hasn't it? And yeah, there's only really one run there of any substance. That was the 25 miles, or the sort of effectively about 40k for the 3 by 10k. But other than that, I mean, there's really only 1 week that he did more than 20 miles, and that was 6 by 3k at marathon pace. So I do wonder whether he's going to be actually conditioned to time on feet. That's always the thing I worry about anybody of any quality. But yeah, I mean, Nick's a very experienced marathon runner, and I think he'll know in his heart. He doesn't necessarily tell us what sort of shape he thinks he's in for the marathon. I'm sure it'll be close, but yeah, he may well surprise us. But I just feel that this time, maybe it's just one marathon too many, but who knows? I may be wrong, maybe not be. But yeah, best of luck to him for sure. So next we come along to Chloe Hamard. It's her debut marathon after some very fine races recently. She's done a Valencia half marathon there, PB 81:29. She's done a PB of a 10k in Wilmslow of 36:56, and I think she also did a PB at the Mid Cheshire 5k that also ran the same course, and she's done a Shrewsbury Park run there, and her best time on that course 18:54. That's where she lives. She lives with her partner Ben McIntosh, who's a 2:23 marathon runner, who also is a coach, and I think it'll be very interesting to see how Chloe goes. I mean, if you look at the training here, it's obviously a lot less volume than the previous two I'm going for, but obviously don't forget, not being funny, that a sub 3 for a woman is probably worth about a 2:40 at least for a man. So in that sense, I'm looking at this training and the equivalent of roughly where I was. I did a 2:20. I did getting ahead of myself. I did a 2:33:53 PB London 2005. So yeah, a bit over 20 years ago. So yeah, but yeah, my last marathon was a 2:59. So look at this training compared to what I did. I think Chloe's got a lot more speed than I did at that time, perhaps had a bit more experience. So yeah, I think it's a very good block. I think it was also she was looking to maximise her training in these shorter races. So you can see here in the Valencia half marathon week, she only ran 33 miles. But I think when I look at her training, whenever she's running what she would call like tempo pace or marathon pace. She said in one of the recent videos that she wasn't quite sure what marathon pace actually is for her, but I mean, it's pretty clear. I think she's pretty much explicitly said in the video that she's going for a sub 3. And if you look here at some of the runs she did, like the most recent one here, she's doing a 10-mile run. She thinks in kilometres, so I kind of interchange between kilometres and miles, but included with that 10-mile run was 11k at 4:15, and 4:15 is absolutely bang on what you need to do for a sub 3, and I think she actually described that as steady, and 81 minutes for a half marathon. Normally you would think if you'd done the training you could probably convert that to a 2:55 at least. I think when I did an 80-minute half marathon I did 2:53 back in 2016. So yeah, I think she's certainly there, and yeah, the 10k is pretty much on a par to where I was when I did that 2:53. So and whenever she came out and ran what was like tempo a bit faster, said it was about that speed. Here's one where she did a 20-mile run and had 4:15 for the steady bit. So she's sort of calling marathon pace steady. So I suppose it really is steady, isn't it, if you think about it? I mean, it should be maybe a bit. I mean, maybe I would call marathon pace more like tempo, and she's actually got a tempo pace of more like 20-minute 5k pace or 4-minute a k. Well, I suppose, yeah, compared to a PB for 36:56 in the 10k, probably is a bit tempo, isn't it? But yeah, just a terminology thing, isn't it? But if she feels that sub 3 marathon race is steady, that does bode well. The only thing I would say, perhaps, that she doesn't have the experience, but yeah, but she did do a couple of sort of time on feet runs, which I always think is important. So you got a 22-mile run here. That was the longest of the block, where she averaged 7:35. And another one there, just a mile slower, and she averaged pretty much the same, 7:29. So I like to see those type of runs along with the one here where we've got 20 miles with 4x5k, slightly progressive. And again, all of those 5ks were around about what you need for a sub 3. So she's got basically 20k of work there within a 20-mile run at sub 3 pace. So I went for a prediction the same as her sort of target of 2:59. I think she could run a bit faster than that, but equally in the marathon, who knows, she may get ahead of herself, go off too fast and then blow up, or she may not feel great on the day. But I think there's every indication that if she runs a sensible race, then a sub 3 is there for taking, and she may feel that she just wants to sort of take this one a bit cautiously early on, because marathon is a bit of a frightening distance. I think it's the one race I do that I really sort of like target all for, but everything else is almost like a 5k 10k. Well, if you mess one up, you can have another go in a week or two, can't you? Even a half marathon comes thick and fast, but a marathon, well, if you've done your best effort, you can't really run another one for a while, can you? So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how she goes. I mean, average training pace here, I mean, it's quite a nice steady pace, isn't it? I always think that's an interesting stat to look at, because it gives the general idea of how much effort you put into your training, and whether sometimes people like to sort of train quite fast. I mean, Andy Rayner sort of does tend to train a lot faster on average than his PBs, but then again, he only trains 5 days a week, so he really tries to cram in an awful lot for that. So it's working very well for him. Does a load of PBs. I think he's PB'd at every distance this year, the Grand Slam of PBs. And I think if Chloe can do a PB in the marathon, it'd be a Grand Slam of PBs for her as well. So yeah, encourage you to peruse some of these things here. I using Copilot actually rather than ChatGPT. I pasted in the week from Strava and asked it to provide these sort of summary stats. So interesting that the run days, she runs every day apart from the odd weeks where she just has the days off, and the hard days are kind of asked Copilot to say how many hard days did each person have. And you can see there that Chloe had 2 or 3 hard days each week, which is pretty typical. If you look back to Jake and stuff like that, even with him, it's averaging pretty much 3 hard days. I forgot to mention with Jake, actually going back to it, he did a 44-mile long run at 6:17 pace. I should put that in red. I should have mentioned that at the time, but yeah, came back to me in my head. So yeah, come back to that. And Nick Bester there, yeah, I mean, he runs pretty much every day. He did have one day off there. Jake literally does run every day. Even when he was injured, he still managed to run every day. I think he managed to have a day off when he was in hospital, didn't he? But other than that, yeah, Nick just had one day off in the whole block, which is always a good sign, isn't it? Because even if you're not feeling well or you're feeling a bit jaded, if you don't have any days off, it means you can't be sort of like desperately ill if you can get out. So yeah, best of luck to Chloe. Very interested to see how she gets on. Okay, for Cole Gibbens, I didn't do quite much the level of detail, partly the fact he had a few struggles. If you remember, he did 2:16 in London in April. Then he did the Berlin Marathon there in September in 2:29, and he was really having real problems. He was actually training quite well for that. And if you go back to the summary here, he did an awful lot of miles for that, 1,370, which is actually more miles than he did for London. But this time, yeah, you can see there that the training has been much more reduced. And if you look back to the actual detail here, you can see that partly due to that, the fact that he had a couple of weeks where really was quite low mileage altogether, 34-mile week there. Obviously, there's some amount of tapering for Berlin, and then he had a week off, which is obviously sensible, got back into it. But I think what's interesting here that he's done what the classic reverse taper. So he's actually increasing his mileage with coming into taper. Obviously, he's not going to run 100 miles this week, but he did say that he's going to have a short taper because he hasn't really been training that well. It seems to be reasonably upbeat again, but I think he's been realistic, and his sort of A target is a sub 222. And a sort of B target is about 225. He says he's going to sort of set off at 225 and see if he can speed up. I think that's why I was slightly cautious of that, because I think if you set off at 225, unless you're really jogging in relative terms, I think it's going to be hard to go from a 225 to a 222. And I think maybe it's just the things will catch up with him. So I predicted 226, maybe a bit pessimistic this time all round. But yeah, I put him in a few sessions that he's done here. I mean, he did a couple of sort of 30k runs here. One a bit sort of more effort for him, 6:14 pace, but yeah, that's best part of a minute per mile slower than he would be doing in his PB. And then he did a session here, 4x5k, around about sort of 17 minutes, just ducking under. Again, for him, that's solid stuff. And then 4x8 minutes there, 3:13's most recent session. So yeah, it's all sort of like starting to come back to some fitness, and maybe he's thinking that Valencia is worth doing just to get some, a solid long run in the block. I do quite slightly puzzle with the tactics here, because he's obviously run Berlin, not being able to run anywhere near his potential, and clearly he's not going to do anywhere near 216 in Valencia. Will that in the long term help him or not? I don't know. I mean, I to think one of these people that starves himself as a marathon and that's all he does. So he was always good on the club scene, doing local races, cross country. So yeah, and he's still young. So I just slightly worry if you go all in on the marathon and do nothing else, whether that is the best idea. Because I think there's a certain element with the marathon I found that when you're new to it, it's all a bit of uncharted territory, and then the more you do, the more you sort of like forget the bad ones that you may have had. So yeah, but he's very keen to run for sure, and he's very keen on running, very keen on racing. And if he can race, then I'm sure he would like to do his best. And he may surprise us, but I think just the training he's shown here that he isn't really going to be in top form. But yeah, best of luck to him, and see if he can build for this and back and do a really good London again. I think that's obviously his sort of hometown, or near enough. He lives in Kent. He's recently moved to Bury St Edmunds, actually, funny enough. I think that's one of the first tracks that had one of those lighting systems around it. So I'm interested to see some new stimulus for some new training partners and new training routes. I think he's already said he's sort of settling in there. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes. So best of luck to Cole. Let's have a very brief look at some of the other YouTubers running. Ben Parks here, one of the most famous YouTubers of all, prolific marathon runner. He was going to do the Sydney Marathon, but unfortunately had a calf tear, didn't he, at the end of August or middle of August. So that blank there was when he missed it. So you can see that since then he's been recovering, building up the mileage. And the peak week there, what was that? 75 miles, and then tapering back down again. So yeah, I can't see that he's going to be doing an awfully great time this time, but I think, knowing Ben, he's not going to have to stand on an expo stand for a whole week this time. Valencia is one of his favourite courses, so you think he ought to be under sub 3, because very experienced marathon runner, but let's hope he doesn't try and push the boat too much. I think it may be a 250, maybe a stretch target for him, but I don't know, I just feel that maybe he hasn't had those time on feet runs that he needs to do. Having said that, I'm just looking at one here. It's effectively a 30k, isn't it? 3x5k around about 241, 242 marathon pace. So yeah, maybe that means he's fitter than I think. But yeah, that is still only 30k, and that is 5k wrap. So let's see how he goes. Best of luck to him. I think also Sarah Place, his partner, is also running, so I'm interested to see how she goes as well. So Phil Sesemann, an elite runner, but he also now has a YouTube channel, so I think he's fine to record on this. I did look at his training one more time before. He does a lot of running with his dogs there. You can see one of them. And so let's have a look at his peak week there. Looks to be a huge 150. So in actual fact, maybe Jake Barraclough isn't doing that many miles more than an elite. But yeah, you can see there that there must be a block of weeks there well above 100 miles. And he's already ran, isn't he, 207 recently. So I'm interested to see if you can build on that. Rather an interesting tactic to run a marathon as a prelude to running another marathon. There may be also a case of the fact that if you run twice, then if you run not so well the second time, well, you've already banked a very good one the first time. But I suppose if you're running that many miles, I mean, you're not far off a marathon a day, are you? 150 miles. I mean, averaging 20 miles a day would be 140, wouldn't it? Doing the maths quickly. So that's another 10 miles. That's averaging, what, 22 miles a day almost? So, yeah, so just running a marathon isn't going to be perhaps sort of relatively too demanding compared to sort of an everyday runner who might be running 40 or 50 miles a week and doing a long run and half of that on the weekend. Then, yeah, a bit of a different kettle of fish, isn't it? So, I'm interested to see how he goes. And you can see that his average training week last 4 weeks is 119 compared to my 27.4. Had a bit of a problem 2 weeks ago. I fell over. I must have hit a root of a tree trunk and had to pull out the British Masters. Haven't really run properly for 2 weeks. And I got a bit of a knee injury. I had to add to my hernia and to sort out. So it was all a bit of tail of woe. So I'm looking at these mileages with a certain amount of envy, under the fact, of course, he's a far better athlete than I ever could or would have ever been. So yeah, best of luck to Phil. Now, interesting, we've also got the Olympic triathlon champion Alex Yee running. I always thought was going to be Britain's best runner, but he actually found even more success in triathlon. But he seems to be having a bit of a moonlighting session back in elite running. He ran the London Marathon, as you recall, and he's in for Valencia as well. Now, you're going to need to be careful looking at this bar chart on Strava, because he's doing a triathlete, he does a lot of cycling as well. So that week there, where it was 269 miles. We're clearly not, that was not all running. There was some cycling in that. So the more interesting stat as a quick one is to look at the last 4 week average was 77 miles. So not running anywhere near the amount of volume as Phil Sesemann is, but you can see on some of the videos they've been training together. And yeah, look like they're knocking out some hard sessions. So you would think that Alex is going to be there or thereabouts. You would have thought that Phil would be ahead of Alex, given the fact that sort of Phil's a dedicated runner and Alex is a bit of a moonlighter, shall we say. Admittedly, probably one of the best non-specialist runners there's ever been in a field like this. It'll be very interesting to see how he goes. I mean, I think he ran like a low 13-minute track 5,000. Probably not on Strava. He didn't really wear a watch, stuff like that. Yeah, there was his marathon. The Strava time was 2:10. I think his actual time was about 2:11, wasn't it? Yeah, there's his London Marathon, 2:11:08 on Strava there. So yeah, I would have thought for Alex, if you can get under 2:10, that would be a great day out, and he can go back to triathlon with a lot of confidence in the running. I mean, I would assume he'll go back to triathlon, but I think maybe not quite good enough now as a runner to cut it as a pure runner. But yeah, he certainly could be if he wanted to, couldn't he? You would think. But if you won the Olympics and an event, have you really got anything more to prove in that event? I suppose that's partly maybe why he's doing this running again. Yeah, it's a nice luxury to have, isn't it, for sure. So going back to the summary, hope you enjoyed this. What do you make of all these people? Is anyone else that is running? There's quite a lot of people, I think, when I looked on the app to see who's running, so a lot of people to follow. If there's anyone I didn't mention at all, please give your comments on them. Please let me know what you think of my predictions. I think I've got it right this time. We think we're going to get a few surprises. Is anyone running yourself, or you know people well that are? Anyway, hope you found this interesting. Like and subscribe with that, and see you in the next one then. Bye.